The Velrani research vessel Quiet Horizon floated in the darkness of space like a wounded bird. Its engines were dead. Its lights flickered on and off. Inside, the crew moved with quiet fear, checking systems that refused to work and staring at screens that showed nothing but bad news. Captain Tova stood on the bridge with her hands clasped behind her back. She was tall for a Velrani, with silver-blue scales that caught the dim emergency lights. Her large, dark eyes moved from one crew member to another, watching them work, watching them fail. She had commanded this ship for 12 years. She had never felt so helpless. "Status report," she said, her voice calm even though her heart was not. Her first officer, a younger Velrani named Kel, looked up from his console. His scales were pale green, and right now they were even paler than usual. "Main engines are completely offline. We have partial life support. Communications are working, but barely. We are drifting." Tova nodded slowly. They had been hit by debris, or so they thought. One moment they were traveling through empty space, studying an ancient battlefield from a war fought 10,000 years ago. The next moment, something struck their ship and everything went wrong. "Send a distress call," Tova ordered. "Standard frequency. Request repair assistance from any nearby vessels." Kel's fingers moved across his console. "Done. But Captain, the nearest cooperative station is 3 cycles away. Even if they send help immediately, we will be waiting a long time." Tova knew this. The outer rim was empty and cold. Ships came here to study the past, not to find friends. They would drift in the darkness and hope their life support held out long enough for rescue to arrive. She walked to the observation window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, far away, was her homeworld. Her family, her children, who were probably sleeping right now, dreaming of their mother coming home. She would come home. She had to believe that. The hours passed slowly. The crew did what they could. They sealed damaged sections. They rationed power. They tried to fix things that could not be fixed with the tools they had. Tova walked through the ship, speaking to each crew member, offering words of comfort she did not entirely feel. Then, 6 hours after the distress call went out, something appeared on their sensors. "Captain," Kel's voice was sharp with surprise. "A ship is approaching. Fast." Tova hurried to the bridge. "Identification?" Kel stared at his screen like he could not believe what he was seeing. "It is a human vessel. Civilian transport. They are calling themselves the Morning Star. Humans." Tova had met humans only twice in her life. They were new to the galaxy, having discovered faster-than-light travel barely 2 centuries ago. Most species still considered them children, stumbling around the stars with wide eyes and strange habits. They were known for being friendly, stubborn, and surprisingly hard to kill. "They are hailing us," Kel said. "Put them through." The main screen flickered, and then a human face appeared. It was a male, middle-aged, with dark hair cut short, and a wide smile that seemed completely inappropriate for the situation. Behind him, Tova could see other humans moving around, carrying equipment. "Good evening, friends," the human said cheerfully. "Name's Do-hun, Chief Engineer of the Morning Star. Something. Night. Our evening 40. 19 well. Our May. Our evening 40. Our evening 40. Good evening, friends. Our evening 40 well. Chief Engineer of the Morning Star. We picked up your distress call and thought we'd swing by. Looks like you folks have had a rough day." Tova blinked. "Swing by?" They were in the middle of nowhere. No one just happened to be passing through the outer rim. "We are grateful for your response," she said carefully. "But I must ask, what brings a human civilian vessel to this region of space?" Do-hun scratched the back of his head. "Ah, you know. Salvage work. These old battlefields have all kinds of interesting stuff floating around. Metals, technology, sometimes even intact machinery. We pick it up, sell it, make a living." He leaned closer to the screen. "But that's not important right now. What's important is your ship is broken. And we've got tools." Mind if we come aboard and take a look? Tova hesitated. She looked at Kel, who shrugged. They had no other options. Their ship was dying. If these humans could help, she had to let them try. You are welcome aboard, she said. 20 minutes later, a small shuttle docked with the quiet horizon. The airlock opened, and 5 humans walked in. They wore simple work clothes, covered in stains and patches. They carried heavy toolboxes that clanged with every step. And at the front was Do-hun, still smiling, still looking like he had just wandered into a party instead of a crisis. But the strangest thing was what one of the humans carried. It was a large metal container, and steam was rising from a small hole in the top. The smell that came from it was strong and bitter, like burnt plants mixed with something earthy. What is that? Kel asked, wrinkling his nose. A young human woman grinned at him. She had long dark hair tied back in a simple knot, and her eyes sparkled with amusement. This is coffee, she said. It's a drink. Keeps us awake and happy. Want some? Kel leaned away from the container. I do not think so. The woman laughed. Fair enough. I'm Yuna, by the way. Navigator. Don't worry, we'll have your ship running in no time. Do-hun was already moving toward the engine room, his team following behind him. He walked like a man who had seen 1,000 broken ships and fixed every single one. Tova followed, watching him carefully. In the engine room, Do-hun set down his toolbox and stared at the damaged machinery. His smile faded for the first time. He crouched down, running his fingers along a twisted piece of metal. He sniffed it. He held it up to the light. Captain, he said slowly. This damage wasn't caused by debris. Tova felt cold. What do you mean? Do-hun stood up and looked at her. His eyes were serious now. All the cheerfulness gone. I've seen a lot of damage in my life. I know what space junk does to a hull. This isn't that. He pointed to the scorch marks on the metal. These are weapon burns. Energy weapons. Someone shot your ship and tried to make it look like an accident. The bridge was silent. Tova's crew stared at Do-hun with wide eyes. Kel's scales had gone completely white. Who would attack us? Tova whispered. We are a research vessel. We have no enemies. Do-hun's jaw tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small communicator. Yuna, he said into it. Send the signal. Priority 1. Copy that, came Yuna's voice. Tova stepped forward. What signal? What are you doing? Do-hun met her eyes. Calling some friends. Captain. Because if someone is shooting at scientists in neutral space, that's not just your problem anymore. He picked up his tools and headed for the engine. Now let's get your ship fixed. We've got a long night ahead of us. The humans worked through the night like machines that never got tired. They crawled into spaces that should have been too small for any creature with bones. They used tools that Tova had never seen before. Strange devices that hummed and sparked, and somehow made broken things work again. And through it all, they drank their bitter coffee and talked to each other in loud, cheerful voices. Tova watched them from the doorway of the engine room. She had tried to sleep, but her mind would not let her rest. Someone had attacked her ship. Someone had tried to kill her crew and make it look like an accident. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those weapon burns on the metal. Do-hun noticed her standing there. He climbed out from under a large piece of machinery, wiping his hands on a dirty cloth. His face was covered in grease, but he was still smiling. Can't sleep? He asked. Tova shook her head. There is too much to think about. Do-hun nodded and walked over to her. He leaned against the wall and looked at the work his team was doing. Your engines were in bad shape, but they're coming along. Another few hours, and you'll be able to fly again. Might even run better than before, if I'm being honest. How is that possible? Tova asked. Our own engineers could not fix this damage. Do-hun shrugged. No offense to your people, but Velrani ships are built clean. Everything in its place. Everything following the rules. That's fine when things work, but when they break, you need the rules. He tapped his chest. Humans build messy. We improvise. When something breaks, We find another way. It's not always pretty, but it works. Tova considered this. It was true that human technology looked rough compared to other species. Their ships were patched and welded and held together in ways that seemed impossible. But they flew. They always flew. I wanted to ask you something, Tova said quietly. Go ahead. The signal you sent. You said you were calling friends. What kind of friends? Do-hun was silent for a moment. He looked at her with those strange human eyes. Round and small compared to Velrani eyes. But somehow very intense. The kind of friends who take attacks on innocent people very seriously. Before Tova could ask more questions, a loud burst of laughter came from down the corridor. She turned to see Yuna, sitting in a circle with 3 of her junior officers. They were holding small rectangular objects with pictures on them. Cards, the humans called them. Some kind of game. I fold, said one of the Velrani officers, putting his cards down with frustration. Yuna laughed and gathered the pile of small tokens they were using as currency. Don't worry, you're getting better. The trick is to watch everyone's faces. Humans call it reading the room. But your face shows nothing, the officer complained. How do we know when you are lying? Yuna grinned. That's the fun part. You don't. Tova walked over to watch the game. It seemed simple enough. Each player received cards with numbers and symbols. They bet on who had the best combination, but there was something else happening too, something beneath the surface. The humans were not just playing a game. They were teaching her crew to relax. Since the attack, her officers had been tense and frightened. Now they were laughing, even if they were losing. They were talking about their homes and their families. One of them was telling Yuna about the Great Lakes of the Velrani homeworld, where the water was so clear you could see to the bottom even when it was 100 meters deep. That sounds beautiful, Yuna said, and she sounded like she meant it. I'd love to see it someday. Oh, you would be welcome, the officer said, and he meant it too. Tova felt something strange in her chest. It took her a moment to recognize it as hope. Later, when the Velrani officers had finally gone to sleep, Tova found Do-hun in a small observation room. He was sitting by the window, holding a cup of coffee, staring out at the stars. He looked tired now. The endless energy from before was gone. May I join you? Tova asked. Of course. She sat across from him. For a while, neither of them spoke. The stars drifted past the window, cold and silent. I have been thinking about what you said, Tova finally said. About the weapon damage. I believe I know who attacked us. Do-hun turned to look at her. The Kreeth Dominion? Tova's eyes widened. How did you know? We hear things, Do-hun said simply. The Kreeth have been pushing into Velrani territory for years. Small raids. Ships that disappear, always with some excuse, some explanation that makes it seem like an accident. He took a sip of his coffee. They're testing you. Seeing how far they can go before you push back. Our military is spread thin, Tova said, her voice heavy with frustration. We are not warriors. We are scientists, explorers. We do not have the ships or the soldiers to fight a war with the Dominion. So you do nothing? What choice do we have? Tova's hands clenched. If we respond with force, they will use it as an excuse for open war. They will say we attacked them. The cooperative will not help us. They never do. They just send messages of concern and hope for peace. Do-hun set down his cup. His face was hard now, all trace of his usual cheerfulness gone. Let me ask you something, Captain. When we showed up, were you expecting help? Tova shook her head. No. I thought we would drift here for days, perhaps weeks. I thought some of my crew might die before rescue arrived. And yet here we are, 6 hours after your distress call. Do-hun leaned forward. We didn't swing by because it was convenient. We came because you needed help, and we were close enough to give it. That's what humans do. But why? Tova asked. We are strangers. We are not even the same species. You owe us nothing. Do-hun smiled, but it was a sad smile. You know what humans spent most of their history doing? Hurting each other. Wars, cruelty, all kinds of terrible things. When we finally reached the stars and found other people out here, a lot of us saw it as a chance to be better. To be the kind of neighbors we always wished we had. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a human, female, and 2 small children. All of them smiling. My wife and kids. They're back on Earth, waiting for me. Every time I go out into the black, I think about them. I think about what kind of galaxy I want them to grow up in. He put the photograph away. A galaxy where people just fly past when someone needs help? That's not good enough. Not for me. Tova was quiet for a long moment. She thought about her own children, sleeping on a world far away, dreaming of their mother. "Thank you," she said finally. Do-hun nodded and picked up his coffee again. "Don't thank me yet. Those friends I called? They should be here soon. And when they arrive, things are going to get interesting." Through the observation window, Tova saw a flash of light. Then another. And another. 7 points of brightness appearing out of nowhere. Growing larger and larger. Ships, human ships, and they did not look like civilian transports. Do-hun stood up and drained the last of his coffee. "Right on time," he said. "Come on, Captain. Let me introduce you to the fleet." Captain Tova had seen many ships in her long career. Velrani science vessels with their elegant curves, trading ships from a dozen different species, even the occasional warship, distant and threatening on her sensors. But she had never seen anything like the human fleet that now surrounded the quiet horizon. There were 8 ships in total, including the Morning Star. But the 7 new arrivals were nothing like Do-hun's small transport. These were military vessels, built for war. Their hulls were thick with armor. Weapons bristled from every surface like the spines of an angry creature. They moved with a speed and precision that seemed impossible for ships so large. The biggest of them was called the Hammer of Soul. It was a battle cruiser, nearly a kilometer long, painted in dark gray, with red markings along its sides. Just looking at it made Tova's scales prickle with unease. This was not a ship that asked questions. This was a ship that answered them, permanently. "They're hailing us," Kel said from his console. His voice was thin and nervous. "Put them through," Tova ordered. The main screen came to life, and Tova found herself looking at a human female. She was older than Do-hun and Yuna, with gray streaks in her short dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades in space. She wore a crisp uniform with medals on the chest, and she smiled warmly as she spoke. "Captain Tova. I'm Admiral Mira, commanding the Terran Republic's 2nd Fleet. I apologize for the dramatic entrance. When my people reported the situation here, I felt it was important to respond quickly." Tova struggled to find words. "Admiral, I am grateful for your assistance with repairs, but I did not request military support. This is a scientific vessel. We are not at war." Admiral Mira's smile faded slightly. "Captain, someone attacked your ship with energy weapons and tried to make it look like an accident. In my experience, that's called the beginning of a war. Whether you've agreed to it or not." Tova felt the weight of those words settle over her. She looked at Do-hun, who was standing near the back of the bridge. He met her eyes and nodded slowly. "Admiral," Tova said carefully, "I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss this situation with you in person. There is much I do not understand. Also, of course, please, come aboard the Hammer of Soul. I'll have a shuttle sent for you immediately." 20 minutes later, Tova was walking through the corridors of the human warship, and she was amazed by what she saw. She had expected something cold and harsh. A vessel built for violence should feel violent, she thought. But the Hammer of Soul was surprisingly warm. The walls were painted in soft colors. There were plants growing in containers along the hallways, real living plants with green leaves and tiny flowers. Crew members passed by and nodded politely, some of them smiling. Music played softly from speakers somewhere. "You seem surprised," Admiral Mira said as she walked beside Tova. "I expected something different," Tova admitted. "Your ship is a weapon of war. But it feels like a home." Mira nodded. Our people spend months, sometimes years, aboard these vessels. If we built them like prisons, our crews would go crazy. A warship should be ready for battle. Yes, but it should also be a place where people can live, and laugh, and remember what they're fighting for. They reached the Admiral's quarters, a comfortable room with large windows looking out into space. Mira gestured for Tova to sit, and poured 2 cups of a hot liquid. Tea, she called it. It was different from coffee, lighter and more pleasant. Now, Mira said, sitting across from her, let me tell you what we know. She activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a map of the region, with the Velrani territories on one side and the Kreth Dominion on the other. The Kreth have been testing your borders for 3 years, Mira explained, pointing to various spots on the map. Small raids here. A ship disappearing there. Trading posts attacked by pirates, who somehow have Kreth weapons. Always deniable, always with an excuse. Tova stared at the map. She knew about some of these incidents, but seeing them all together was different. It was a pattern. Clear and obvious. Why? She asked. What do they want? Your territory is rich in resources, Mira said. Rare minerals, habitable planets, strategic positions. The Kreth Dominion is expanding, and you're in their way. But they don't want a real war, at least not yet. A real war would bring the Galactic Cooperative into the conflict. And even the Kreth aren't stupid enough to fight everyone at once. So they test. They push. They wait for you to give up and surrender your outer territories without a fight. Tova felt sick. And if we don't surrender, then they'll keep pushing until something breaks. A incident too big to ignore. A massacre that can't be covered up. And by then, it will be too late. They'll have their excuse, and your people won't be ready to fight back. The room was silent. Tova looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, her family was living their peaceful lives, completely unaware of the danger creeping closer. Why are you telling me this? She finally asked. Why do humans care what happens to the Velrani? Admiral Mira set down her teacup. Her eyes were serious but kind. Because we've seen this before. On our own world. In our own history, powerful nations bullying weaker ones, testing their limits, taking what they wanted piece by piece. We know how it ends, and we decided, when we reached the stars, that we wouldn't let it happen to others if we could help it. But what can you do? This is our conflict. Our space. If humans intervene, it could start a larger war. Mira smiled, and there was something fierce in that smile. Captain, there's a difference between starting a war and sending a message. Right now, the Kreth think they can attack your ships and face no consequences. We're going to show them they're wrong. How? We wait. My intelligence suggests the Kreth already know about your damaged ship. They'll send vessels to finish the job, to make sure there are no witnesses. But when they arrive, they won't find a helpless research vessel. Mira stood and walked to the window. They'll find us. Tova's heart beat faster. You want to fight them? Only if they force us to. We're going to give them a chance to leave peacefully. We'll tell them that the quiet horizon is under our protection. If they're smart, they'll turn around and go home. Mira turned back to face her. But if they're not smart, we'll teach them a lesson they won't forget. Tova thought about this for a long moment. She thought about her crew, who had been so frightened just hours ago. She thought about her people, living in fear of shadows and threats they couldn't fight. And she thought about these strange humans, who had arrived with coffee and tools and were now offering to stand beside her against an enemy that wasn't even theirs. What do you need from us? She asked. Just your permission, Mira said. This is your space, your conflict. Tova stood. She was taller than the human admiral, but somehow Mira seemed just as large. You have it. Do what you must. Admiral Mira extended her hand. Tova had learned about this human custom. The handshake. A gesture of agreement and respect. She took Mira's hand and shook it firmly. Thank you, Captain. Now, Get back to your ship and tell your crew to stay calm. Whatever happens next, we'll handle it." Tova nodded and walked toward the door. But before she left, she turned back one more time. "Admiral, if the Kreth do attack, if there is a battle, do you truly believe you can win?" Mira's smile widened. "Captain, we're humans. We don't know how to lose." 3 days passed in tense silence. The human fleet spread out around the quiet horizon like a protective shell, their sensors reaching far into the darkness. The Velrani crew watched and waited, speaking in hushed voices, jumping at every beep and flash from their consoles. Tova spent most of her time on the bridge. She had never been good at waiting. Every hour felt like a year. She found herself pacing back and forth, checking the same readings over and over, even though nothing had changed. Dohun and his team had finished their repairs and returned to the Morning Star, but they stayed close. Yuna sent regular messages to the Velrani crew, mostly jokes and pictures of food from the human ship's kitchen. It was a small kindness, but it helped. Her officers laughed at the strange dishes and argued about whether they would taste good or terrible. On the morning of the third day, Kel looked up from his console with wide eyes. "Captain, multiple contacts approaching from hyperspace. Large signatures. Military class." Tova's blood turned cold. "How many?" 12 ships. Configuration matches Kreth Dominion Warfleet. 12 ships. The human fleet had only 8. Tova felt her legs weaken, and she gripped the edge of her command chair to stay standing. Admiral Mira's voice came through the communication system, calm and steady. "All ships. This is the Hammer of Soul. We have incoming hostiles. Hold formation and wait for my command. Let's see what they want before we start anything." The Kreth fleet dropped out of hyperspace and filled the quiet horizon's view screen. They were ugly ships, dark and angular, covered in weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. At the front was the largest vessel, a dreadnought twice the size of the Hammer of Soul. Its hull decorated with symbols of conquest and death. A transmission came through. Tova's screen flickered, and she found herself looking at a Kreth commander. The creature was massive, with thick, chitinous plates covering its body and multiple eyes that gleamed with arrogance. Its mandibles clicked as it spoke. The sounds translated into words by the computer. "Velrani vessel, you are in restricted space. You will power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Before Tova could respond, Admiral Mira's voice cut in. "This is Admiral Mira, of the Terran Republic's Second Fleet. The vessel, Quiet Horizon, and its crew are under our protection. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Kreth commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "Humans. Small creatures from a small world. You have no business here. This is Dominion territory now." "Funny," Mira replied. "My maps say this is neutral space, and my understanding is that attacking civilian research vessels in neutral space is an act of war." "War?" The Kreth commander leaned forward, its many eyes focusing on the camera. "You have 8 ships. We have 12. If you want war, you will die screaming in the cold of space. I don't think so. But I'm going to give you one chance to leave peacefully. Turn around. Go home. Tell your superiors that the Velrani have friends now, friends who don't appreciate bullies." The Kreth commander was silent for a long moment. Then it spoke a single command in its own language, and the transmission ended. "They're powering weapons," Kel reported, his voice breaking with fear. "All hands, battle stations," Admiral Mira announced. "Let's show these bugs how humans fight." The battle began. The Kreth fired first, a wave of energy blasts racing toward the human fleet. But the human ships were already moving, scattering in patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly coordinated. The Hammer of Soul took the center position, its shields flaring bright as enemy fire struck them. Tova watched in amazement as the human vessels danced through space. They were so fast. Their movements were tight and precise, slipping between enemy shots like water flowing around stones. And when they fired back, their weapons hit hard. The first Kreth cruiser exploded in a ball of fire. Then another. The human ships worked in pairs, covering each other, drawing enemy attention while their partners struck from unexpected angles. It was beautiful in a terrible way, like watching a storm destroy everything in its path. The Hammer of Soul pushed forward into the heart of the enemy formation. A massive Kreth warship targeted it with everything it had, plasma beams and missiles and weapons that Tova couldn't even identify. The human cruiser shuddered under the assault. Parts of its hull glowed red from the heat. It looked like it was dying, but it kept moving. The Hammer of Soul fired its main cannon, a beam of white-hot energy that cut through the Kreth warship like a blade through soft flesh. The enemy vessel split in half, its sections spinning away into the darkness, and the human cruiser flew through the wreckage with fires still burning on its hull. "How is that possible?" Kel whispered. "They took so much damage. They should be dead." A smaller human ship called the Busan's Pride was engaged with a Kreth destroyer twice its size. The destroyer was winning, its weapons tearing chunks of armor from the human vessel, but instead of retreating, the Busan's Pride accelerated. It rammed the destroyer head-on. The collision was spectacular. Both ships crumpled together, locked in a deadly embrace. For a moment, everything was still. Then the destroyer's reactor exploded, and both vessels disappeared in a flash of light. Tova closed her eyes, mourning the loss. But then a voice crackled over the communication system. "Busan's Pride here. We're still flying. Barely. Someone want to give us a tow?" The human crew had survived. Somehow, impossibly, they had survived. The battle continued for 11 minutes. 11 minutes of chaos and fire and screaming metal. The human fleet took damage, but they kept fighting. They never stopped. They never hesitated. When one ship was hurt, the others closed ranks to protect it. When an opportunity appeared, they struck with savage precision. By the end, 8 Kreth ships were debris floating in space. The remaining 4 were running, their engines burning at maximum, as they fled toward the safety of hyperspace. The Kreth dreadnought was among the survivors, but it was wounded, trailing smoke and sparks. Admiral Mira's voice came through, and for the first time, she sounded tired. "This is Admiral Mira to the Kreth Dominion. You came here to destroy a defenseless research vessel. You found something else. Go home and tell your leaders what happened here today. And tell them this. The Velrani are our friends now. If you touch them again, we won't just send 8 ships. We'll bring everything we have, and we won't stop until we're having this conversation in your capital city." The last Kreth ship vanished into hyperspace. The battle was over. Tova stood in the center of her bridge, surrounded by her crew, all of them staring at the view screen in shocked silence. The human fleet floated among the wreckage of their enemies, battered but unbroken. "We won," Kel said, and his voice was filled with wonder. "No," Tova said quietly. "They won. They won for us." She opened a channel to the Hammer of Soul. "Admiral Mira, I do not have the words to express my gratitude. Your people fought and bled for strangers. I have never seen anything like it." Mira's face appeared on the screen. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, and her uniform was covered in ash. But she was smiling. "Just being good neighbors, Captain. Now what do you say we get out of here before anyone else shows up?" Behind her, Tova could see human crew members cheering and embracing each other. They had faced death and walked away alive. And they had done it for people they had never met. "Yes," Tova said. And for the first time in days, she smiled too. "Let's go home." The journey home took 5 days. The human fleet escorted the quiet horizon through open space, their damaged ships limping along but refusing to leave until the Velrani vessel was safely within its own territory. Admiral Mira had offered to transfer Tova's crew to one of the faster human ships, but Tova had declined. She wanted to stay with her own vessel, the ship that had nearly become her grave and was now carrying her back to her family. On the last day, as the quiet horizon approached the border of Velrani space, Tova stood on the observation deck and watched the stars drift past. She had spent many hours here during the journey, thinking about everything that had happened, trying to understand it. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Do-hun walking in. His hands were clean now, the grease and dirt washed away, but he still moved like a man more comfortable with tools than with words. He was holding 2 cups. "Thought you might want some company," he said. Tova nodded and gestured for him to sit beside her. He handed her one of the cups. She looked at it suspiciously. "Coffee? Tea. Actually, thought you might prefer it." Tova took a sip. It was warm and slightly sweet, with a gentle flavor that reminded her of the flowering trees on her homeworld. "This is good. Thank you." They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. The human fleet moved in formation around them, a protective shell of metal and fire. Tomorrow, they would be gone, returning to their own space, their own lives, and Tova would have to explain to her government what had happened. "I don't understand your people," she finally said. Do-hun chuckled. "Join the club." "One." "Join the club. Most of us don't understand ourselves either. I'm being serious. You came to repair our ship. You stayed to fight our war. You asked for nothing in return. How am I supposed to make sense of that?" Do-hun was quiet for a moment. He stared out at the darkness, and his face was thoughtful. "When I was a kid, my grandfather used to tell me stories about the old days on Earth. Before we had peace, before we reached the stars, humanity spent thousands of years hurting each other. Wars that killed millions. Cruelty that makes the Kreth look gentle. We did terrible things to each other, and we did them over and over again." He paused to take a drink of his coffee. "When we finally got our act together and started exploring space, a lot of people thought the universe would be empty. They thought we were alone, and then we found out we weren't. There were other people out here, other civilizations, some of them older than our entire history, and suddenly everything changed. Changed how? Well, some people wanted to go right back to the old ways. Conquer everything, take what we wanted, show the galaxy that humans were tough. But most of us saw it differently. We saw it as a second chance, a chance to be better than we were before." He looked at her with those strange round human eyes. "The galaxy gave us neighbors, real neighbors, with families and dreams and hopes just like ours, and we decided that maybe this time, we could be the kind of neighbors we always wished we had." Tova considered this. She thought about the Velrani way, the centuries of peaceful exploration, the careful avoidance of conflict. Her people had always believed that kindness was weakness, that the strong took and the weak gave. And yet these humans, who fought like demons and laughed in the face of death, had come to save strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. "Besides," Do-hun added with a small smile, "you needed help. What kind of people would we be if we just flew past?" Tova felt something warm in her chest. It was not a feeling she could name, but it was good. "My people will want to understand what happened here. They will want to know why humans risked their lives for us. I'm not sure I can explain it in a way that makes sense." Do-hun shrugged. "Then don't try to explain it. Just tell them the truth. We saw someone in trouble, and we helped. That's what neighbors do." The door opened again, and Yuna walked in. She was carrying a small package wrapped in colorful paper. "Captain Tova, I was looking for you. I wanted to give you something before we left." Tova took the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a deck of playing cards, the same kind Yuna had used to teach her officers poker. There was also a small note written in neat human letters. "What does it say?" Tova asked. Yuna grinned. "It says, for the next time you're bored, you'll get better at poker. I promise." I also included instructions for a few other games. Thought your crew might enjoy them during long voyages. Tova looked at the cards, at the strange symbols and bright colors. Such a simple gift. Such a human gift. "Thank you, Yuna. I will treasure this. Hey, maybe next time we see each other, we can have a rematch. I'll even let you win a few hands." Tova found herself laughing, a sound she had not made in weeks. "I would like that very much." The following morning, the quiet horizon crossed into Velrani space. The human fleet accompanied them to the border, then stopped. One by one, the warships began to turn, preparing to jump to hyperspace and return home. Admiral Mira sent a final message. Captain Tova, it's been an honor. If you ever need us again, just call. We'll come running. I believe you will, Tova replied. Safe travels, Admiral. And thank you. For everything. Just being good neighbors. Mira out. The hammer of Sol vanished in a flash of light. Then the other ships followed. One after another. Until only the morning star remained. Dohun's face appeared on the screen. Take care of yourself, Captain. And drink more tea. It's good for you. Take care of yourself as well, Dohun. May your journeys be safe, and your coffee be strong. Dohun laughed and gave her a strange human gesture, touching his forehead and then pointing at her. A salute, she had learned. A sign of respect. Then the morning star turned and jumped away, leaving the quiet horizon alone in its own space. Tova walked to the observation deck one final time. She looked out at the stars of her homeland, the familiar constellations that had guided her people for centuries. Everything looked the same, but she knew that everything had changed. Her crew gathered around her, watching the last traces of hyperspace fade into nothing. Kel spoke first. What do we tell Command, Captain? About the humans? Tova thought about this for a long moment. She thought about Dohun and his coffee, about Yuna and her cards, about Admiral Mira standing on the bridge of a burning ship, and smiling. She thought about what it meant to be a good neighbor in a cold and dangerous galaxy. We tell them the truth, she said finally. We asked for repairs. Humans arrived with coffee, tools, and a fleet ready for war. When I asked why they helped us, they said they were just being good neighbors. She paused and looked at her crew, at the hope in their eyes. I believe them, and I believe we have much to learn from these strange, wonderful people. She walked back to the bridge, her officers following behind. There would be reports to file, questions to answer, meetings to attend, but for the first time in a long time, Tova was not worried about the future. Because somewhere out there, in the darkness between the stars, the humans were watching. And if anything went wrong, they would come running. That was what neighbors did. And somehow, against all odds, the Velrani had found the best neighbors in the entire galaxy.